They leer down at you from the walls of tall buildings, their stone faces contorted in grotesque grimaces. Don't blink. They were sculpted to protect their buildings from the wear of weather and aging, and they stand now as symbols of their time. They are gargoyles. You know me. I'm fascinated by the intersections of nature with our society and culture, and I've been curious about gargoyles for a while because there's so much potential animal and nature symbolism tied up with their creation. Plus, their dark Gothic-era origins make gargoyles the perfect theme for this year's spooky Halloween video. Gargoyles are spouts in the form of a carved, grotesque human or animal head projecting from the top of a wall to throw off rainwater, so they're basically anti-erosion measures incorporated into the design of stone buildings. Gargoyle is literally French for water spout, so technically we should call these carvings grotesques when they're not in the form of a spout. However, I'm going to use these terms interchangeably for the sake of ease. Gargoyles are most recognized as appearing on the outside of old Gothic churches, although they can appear on any building and be fashioned of stone or metal. Many gargoyles are demons like this one, and humans like this are often portrayed as well, but I'd like to focus on the animals, which make up the overwhelming majority of these sculptures. But these things were originally designed to be water spouts, so why bother making them the shape of animals? There aren't really any records of the purpose or intent behind the stylings of gargoyles, which means scholars have been free to determine their own interpretations of the sculptures. These could just be decorations to make buildings more attractive. Many grotesques are silly or even profane, so they could also serve as entertainment. However, there are a few interpretations that feel like they make more sense to me. Since a vast majority of the population in the Middle Ages couldn't read, the best way to communicate values or tell stories was through pictures and symbols. And as we'll quickly see as a central theme here, most of the values and stories people thought were important centered around the Christian church. The horrific iconography of people being chased or eaten by monsters, which is often present in gargoyle sculptures, may have been a way to motivate the public to attend church. Demons and the scariest hybrid monsters might also have been symbols of the worst diseases sweeping through the population of the Middle Ages, like the Black Plague and ergot madness. But my favorite reason for so much animal imagery in these grotesque sculptures, especially on church buildings, was the prolific co-opting of pagan symbols by the Christian church as a way to bring over new followers from earlier faiths. However, since many gargoyle sculptures are fearsome looking in some way, this may also have been an attempt to throw light on the dichotomy between the goodness of the Christian church and the badness of nature, the wilderness, and pagan faiths. But the church didn't just co-opt animal imagery from earlier faiths. It also assigned its own symbolism to many species. It's important to remember that use of animals as symbols or metaphors predates Christianity. Just think about Aesop and his fables. Most cultures assign at least some symbolism to animals, and this makes sense. Animals are relatable. We all have at least some experience with animals, and the attribution of specific characteristics to animals and their use in our art points to the fact that the roots of our cultures lie deep in nature. But you're here to see gargoyles, so I guess it's time we looked at some. Gargoyles and other animals in the art of the Middle Ages come in 4 basic flavors. The first category is familiar or everyday animals, including domestic animals. These are usually the most common in art because they're also the most common in life. Owls, like this one, have traditionally been associated with wisdom. Eagles were symbols of nobility, as the eagle is the king of the sky. For some reason, partridges specifically were symbols of lust, but we'll get back to that idea in a moment. I thought it was really odd that most non-mammalian animals weren't given symbology in any of the sources I found. Frogs were signs of the devil, sin, and heresy, because in some religious texts, frogs were said to emerge from false prophets' mouths. It will come as no surprise to you that snakes and serpents were also symbols of sin and the devil, because Genesis, and were also associated with the deadly sin of envy. And bumper stickers will show you that the fish is still a symbol for Jesus, just as it was in the Middle Ages. Wolves were considered wild and treacherous, and often associated with the deadly sin of greed. Foxes have been seen as crafty and mischievous in many cultures, and the Middle Ages in Europe was no exception. But the domestic canine, the dog, was seen in a much more flattering light than its relatives. Dogs were said to be the smartest animals because they were the only ones who could recognize their own names. It's no surprise that dogs were associated with loyalty. On the flip side, cats were seen as symbols of heretics because they traditionally don't get along well with dogs. wild boars were thought of as quick-tempered and ferocious, and therefore were associated with the deadly sin of anger. Bears like this one could sometimes indicate a Celtic warrior, but were more often used to symbolize the deadly sin gluttony. And because so many of these symbols revolve around Christian values, there's also the lamb as a traditional symbol for Jesus, with sheep serving as symbols for general church followers. On the other hand, goats were often used as symbols of the devil, because we didn't have enough of those already. Rabbits were used as a symbol of fertility, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Donkeys were associated with the deadly sin of sloth, and pigs were associated with the deadly sin of lust. Can we talk about lust for a second? Yeah, that's what I thought. But seriously, a lot of animals seem to be symbols for lust, right? I couldn't find a good rationale for this in any of the sources I read, but I have a theory of my own. Since animals mate in public without any shame about the openness of the act, this may have been titillating for the people in the Middle Ages, as well as many other time periods. And just like the devil, lust is bad, don't you know? So people needed lots of symbols to remind them of it. The next popular category for use in gargoyles was exotic animals. They were more exciting because they were rare, and sculptors often worked from secondary sources like bestiary books because they had never seen a live model. Elephants were used as symbols of the Bible's Adam and Eve story. Crocodiles were seen as hypocritical. That's where we get the phrase crocodile tears. Camels were seen as prudent and humble because they kneel down, but for some reason they were also considered lustful? Monkeys and apes served as yet another symbol for the devil because they're cunning and malicious, and they threw lust in there too, just for good measure. And of course, we can't forget the noble king of the beasts, the lion. Lions were symbols of courage, and sometimes stood for Jesus, which is interesting because lions were also occasionally used in the Bible as symbols of the devil. When it came to the 7 deadlies, lions rounded it out by standing for pride. Get it? A pride of lions? Anyway, sculptors in the Middle Ages really liked lions. No, seriously, they carved a lot of lion gargoyles. Like, a lot. Mythical and imaginary creatures were also exciting subjects for gargoyle artists. I thought it was interesting that many of these, including centaurs and mermaids, were considered animals even though they were part human. It seems that some of these mythical creatures, as well as the animals in the final category, were used to show the dual nature of many values and morals. Dragons, like these, were associated with sin because of their similarity to serpents, as were basilisks, like this one. Unicorns were symbols of Jesus, purity, and chivalry. There were also many composite or hybrid creatures invented by artists in the Middle Ages that make up the 4th gargoyle category. As with the combined animal-human mythical creatures, many of these were used to show the duality of nature, like this paired eagle and man. Sometimes the combinations were unfamiliar, like this creature with a short elephant trunk and sharp canine teeth. But others, like these griffins, have survived the test of time and continue to be used in fantastical art today. I'm sure part of the reason for the griffins' popularity is their relation to lions and all the values they symbolize. When we come right down to it, the choice of what animals were depicted in gargoyles and grotesques really hinged on what was familiar and what made good religious and moral symbols. I also think these sculptures were a way for people to address the unknown facets of nature and wild things. This is especially well illustrated in green man iconography, like these, where a usually human face is surrounded by or made out of plant material and greenery. These green men, also known as Jack of the Green or Jack Yule, were symbols of nature and the forest, and were yet another way for the church to incorporate pagan symbology to gain followers. And then there's this green lion, because lions. Animal grotesques didn't disappear with the end of the Gothic era, though. They were revived in more realistic depictions as part of the naturalism trend. Sculptures like these, from the London Museum of Natural History, are more faithful to their live counterparts, but still entertain viewers. The Gothic revival of the 1800s also helped bring back the style of gargoyles and grotesques on buildings. They still have a modern following in pop culture because of their quirky appearance and weird history. This bison on a building in Colorado and this one on a building in Chicago are both grotesques that reflect the region's natural resources. And this plucky beaver at Oregon State University is a grotesque version of the school's mascot. I also found this giant stone ram in front of the US courthouse in Denver, but I can't imagine it was meant to symbolize the devil. Turns out, this isn't actually a gargoyle or a grotesque, but rather a guardian, a kind of full-body animal sculpture far older than gargoyles, dating back to ancient Greece, Rome, and Egypt. I'd like very much to thank the photographers who helped me in gathering pictures of gargoyles and grotesques for use in this video. Thanks to AJ from Lib Lab, Jarvis Chen, and Avon from Alliterative. You can find their links down in the video description along with a list of my research sources. It's important to remember that the symbol attributions I mentioned here are very Western and Christian in their focus, but that all cultures have deep connections to nature. What other cultural perspectives would you like me to research for videos? We can and should be investigating natural symbolism from multiple points of view and including diverse voices in the conversation. Let me know what you think down in the comments. If you liked this video, don't forget to like it. If you didn't like this video, please share it with someone who would. And if you'd like to support the Roving Naturalist, remember to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm a periodic contributor on the radio show Blue Dot, so you should go check that out as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.